Hello and welcome to Stratagem TV, a series of programmes in which we look at the big issues heading into the Northern Ireland Assembly election. In this episode we focus on the economy, a global problem with local consequences. What can local politicians do to get Northern Ireland back on its feet? Is the executive doing enough to get us through this recession? We look at the questions and the solutions. Now, looking at the economy, one of the big issues which has been coming up during this election campaign, and indeed I suppose over the past few years, is the idea that perhaps corporation tax should be reduced in Northern Ireland. Do you think that's a good idea, and if so, will it have a major impact?
I think in principle, yes, certainly it would seem to be a good idea. It would seem to be the quickest way to reinvigorate the economy, give it something new. The practice, of course, is the difficult thing, how it happens. But it certainly seems, in contrast to previous attempts to bring this idea up, that there at least is political will, that Westminster is at least listening for a change.
Well, it is a gamble. It's a gamble with our own money. I think it's probably on balance worth it. I've been convinced by the arguments. I was more sceptical at an earlier stage. The beauty of it is it's simple for incoming investors to see that we don't have it. It can help transform us from sort of war zone to enterprise zone. Hopefully it'll be the first thing people think of. And also there's a problem that the EU are going to stop us incentivising industry with grants as we did in the future. There's going to come restrictions on that, so it's probably the way to go.
It's often framed, both here and in the English papers, as an equalisation thing with the Republic. That's not likely to happen. In fact, any local administration that sets their corporation tax rate anyway distant from the UK tax rate runs a huge kind of risk in terms of managing the exchequer. So I think, but what is happening, and I think the administration in London is certainly serious about the offer. I mean, they're going to bring their tax rate down from 28% to 23% over the next 5 years. So we can see that drop happening almost certainly. It means we probably got permission to go a bit faster than them. The question is, do the politicians want to take the risk? I'm not sure they do.
Do you believe that the Northern Ireland Executive has the balance right in terms of its focus on foreign direct investment and indigenous growth?
Those are two ways that any economy needs to build a longer-term sustainable future. Of course, we need to grow from the bottom up. 90% of our companies are less than 10 people, but we also need the big purchasing power and investment power of those foreign companies who want perhaps a toehold into the European markets. They want an English-speaking workforce. They want greenfield sites. So a lot of that is a question of balance. And in the past, I don't think we've used our FDI correctly. And we've seen the big factories come, but then equally as quickly they go. That's where we need to build from the bottom up for sustainability.
I think there's, I don't think anyone would be foolish enough to go with completely one or the other. I think foreign direct investment is a massive driver. I mean, for all the parts of the southern economy that have fallen apart, they've, excuse me, they've obviously protected corporation tax. The businesses that have been attracted through that, the Googles, those sort of big names, those are still performing very well. I think the interesting thing with the corporation tax will be what the effect will be for small companies here, whether the flow-on effects will be, the case for those will be strong enough to actually encourage everyone to get behind it, because at the moment there is an argument that there will be big supply chain benefits for smaller indigenous companies, but whether those actually come through in practice will be the key thing, I think, really.
As somebody involved in the business community, what would you feel are the biggest barriers for private sector investment in Northern Ireland?
Quite hard to kind of pin it down, but there is a lack of possibly joined up thinking within government where they're trying to help, but the silo mentality of the way government departments work tends to hold that back. And I suppose government in general is quite conservative in its nature in protecting its silos. And so we have businesses trying to open up say in forest parks, but at the same time the Department of Agriculture has people there whose conservation need is preventing them from doing so. I suppose we have government departments or local councils running visitor attractions, but they're not professional visitor attraction managers, but they're reluctant to give them over in service level agreements to private sector providers who maybe could make a better fist whilst maintaining the fabric of the visitor attraction in the first place for the owner.
Well, I mean, if you're going to promote the idea of Northern Ireland as an enterprise zone, the corporation tax is one thing, that's the one that will get you noticed abroad, but there's also planning permission. Our planning procedures are very, very slow. Now, there's a planning bill going in. Let's see if that'll work, but I think there should be basically an atmosphere where it's possible for industry to open up. I think that also, I mean, I mentioned before that the private sector, the local private sector, needs to be given a little bit of a shake. They can't, you know, they can't all be putting their money into retail. We need to particularly encourage export-orientated industries. I mean, I'm a bit disinterested in the kind of struggle between Tesco's and the small shopkeepers, for instance. I think our town centre should be kept alive, but I mean, basically there will be a retail sector here. I think business people need to think about something that they can send abroad and create fresh jobs that somebody else won't create.
And do you feel that politicians in Northern Ireland get business or what businesses' requirements are? Or are they too far removed from the coalface of enterprise to really understand what needs done to, I suppose, encourage people to go into business and to then, as a result of that, tilt the economy more in favour of private enterprise rather than the public sector?
I don't know. You couldn't really tar them all with the same brush. There are some politicians who really do get business, I think, and who are very engaged with people both at small business and large corporate level, and I think they understand the issues. There are a lot of them who I think do just still pay lip service slightly.
Well, I think that after the election, it would be a good idea. I mean, it was something that was mooted by Tom Elliott, but would be a good idea to get parties together and decide some of the big issues. For instance, water rates is something that a lot of politicians will tell you privately we're going to have sooner or later. There were promises made back in 2007 which I think have got to be looked at. There were a series of giveaways whenever the property boom was there, and the executive felt we can sell off public land, and that'll pay for whatever we promise. And the water rates was one of them, the regional rates, free prescriptions, free travel for the elderly. That's not a very expensive one, but there are a number of those things, and I think they're probably going to have to be looked at some stage because the economy just didn't continue as we were at that time.
I think the penny hasn't quite dropped either within the public sector or the wider community, and indeed in the business sector, although they've been grappling with changes for some time. But I don't think the penny has quite dropped exactly how difficult the next few years are going to be. I think the most depressing read I've certainly looked at in the last few weeks was the PricewaterhouseCoopers Economic Outlook for March 2011. And what really worried me about that is not what they were saying in terms of the short term, but what PwC are saying is the economic fundamentals in Northern Ireland are not good. So we need to spend time getting those economic fundamentals right, building the infrastructure that we need, attracting business, and also attracting new business startups. I think if we do that, we'll go a long way to starting to redress some of the balance.
The levers aren't really here. I mean, you know, the major economic levers are still with the Chancellor in London, as all our local politicians are very keen to tell you when they get labelled with the cuts. It's out of our control. These are handed down. It's come to us. We have no control over this stuff. So what the local ministers, whether they have the economy under their brief or not, can actually do to change. I mean, partly it's Whitehall that makes the major decisions, but partly it's also the global economy. Yeah. Like the Republic, we are a very small ship in a very big ocean. And until the weather changes, the macro weather changes, I'm not sure there's a great deal they can do on that.